For thousands of years, legends have described people with an innate ability to predict future events. This supernatural ability is mentioned in the oral traditions and texts of various cultures around the world, and each seer has a unique way of predicting events that will occur in the centuries after his or her death. Perhaps no clairvoyant is remembered as enigmatically as the famous French astrologer Nostradamus, whose prophecies continue to thrill the world more than 4 centuries after his death. The Frenchman, who is often credited with predicting events such as the Great Fire of London or the events in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, wrote more than 6,000 prophecies, many of which are believed to have come true. In this video, we take a look at some of the more special predictions, the prophecies of Nostradamus that have remained forgotten in the hidden archives. There he left warnings of extraordinary and catastrophic events that humanity will most likely experience in the future, according to the writings of the French astrologer. But first, let's understand why Nostradamus is more special. Throughout history, we have heard of personalities who have possessed the ability to peer through the veil of time using supernatural insights, allowing them to predict the future. Groups such as the Magi of the Middle East and the Celtic Druids are known to have been blessed with such gifts and passed their ability from teacher to student. However, few people in history are believed to have been born with such an ability, including the revered French astrologer Nostradamus. Born in Saint-Rémy, France in the early 16th century, Nostradamus lived in a time of great social and political turmoil. Little is known about his early childhood, but historians suggest that he was extremely intelligent and did well in school. Nostradamus began studying at the University of Montpellier in the hope of obtaining a doctorate, but was very soon expelled from the school. After this life-changing event, he decided to travel around his native France and then to Italy and Spain for almost a decade, gaining a wealth of knowledge about herbs and how they could be used as medicines. His knowledge proved extremely valuable and helped countless plague sufferers. In the 1630s, Nostradamus decided to open his own medical practice, although he had no medical training, and worked as a doctor for several years. Over the next decade, he became proficient in astrology and other arts, resulting in the Frenchman beginning to make predictions about the future in 1547. He published his prophecies in an extensive book entitled Prophecies, which appeared in 1555. His unique predictions are set forth in quatrains, which are 4 lines of rhymed verse. They are grouped into hundreds, and each group of 100 quatrains is called a century. With the publication of his book, Nostradamus elevated his status from an ordinary physician to a renowned clairvoyant during his lifetime, after many of his prophecies came true. The notoriety he gained for his predictions led to the Frenchman's near-star status. He was soon invited to the court of Catherine de' Medici, who was the queen consort of King Henri II of France. Nostradamus made his predictions using a specific form of astrology known as predictive astrology or judicial astrology. He relied heavily on the alignment of the heavenly bodies and the movement of the planets to gather information for his predictions. The French astronomer believed that the varied positions and interactions of these celestial bodies could allow him to accurately predict future events on our planet. However, this was not the only way in which Nostradamus made his famous predictions. He also claimed to have had prophetic dreams and visions that revealed future events to him while he slept at night. Nostradamus later attempted to interpret these visions using his knowledge of astronomy, which allowed him to create his quatrains. According to another theory, the Frenchman may have indulged in certain psychoactive herbs that brought him to a trance-like state and heightened consciousness, which he used to gain information about the future. Using the information gathered from his astrological research, Nostradamus wrote many almanacs during his lifetime containing numerous prophecies that were to occur at some point in the future. Less than a decade after publishing the first edition of the Prophecies, the French astrologer died after a severe attack of gout, which eventually developed into edema. However, over the following centuries, his prophecies became increasingly popular, as many of the quatrains seemed to speak of events that eventually came to pass. Many people believe that Nostradamus correctly predicted the French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon, the creation of the atomic bomb, the landing of astronauts on the moon, and even some of the greatest assassinations in history. Even though we are approaching the middle of our decade, There are a few predictions made by the French astrologer that have not yet manifested, yet we are only halfway there. One of them focuses on a geopolitical conflict that should happen right around the middle of this decade. In a quatrain, he mentions war and sea battle and a red adversary. Could this be a hint of a potential Cold War between the US and China? If we identify the red adversary with China, then we are left to assume that we could be talking about a battle in the South China Sea, where tensions are currently rising over the CCP's attempts to claim 11 billion barrels of untapped oil. Given the strength of the Chinese Navy, the possibility of a diplomatic incident or worse cannot be ruled out. Another quatrain warns that the new leader will weaken his gaze and hold on to office for a long time, which many take to mean that the new pope will come to power right in the middle of our decade. The specific meaning of weakens remains open to interpretation. However, as Pope Francis is in his mid-80s and facing a number of health issues, Nostradamus' prophecy is very likely to come true in the coming months. But he makes many more predictions that are to unfold in the next few years. For 2025, the French astrologer has made a prediction that could lead to drastic socio-political changes, including an end to the conflict in Ukraine. In the quatrain, he writes, "During the long war, the whole army grows weary, so that they find no money for the soldiers. Instead of gold or silver, they will end up with coins of leather, Gaulish brass, and the sign of the crescent moon." Many see the exhausted army as a sign that hostilities between the nations may be coming to an end. Presumably, the mention of Gaulish brass suggests French involvement. To what end, however, remains unclear. The mention of the crescent points to Turkey having also intervened in some way. Both it and France expressed their concerns at the height of the conflict and may have a significant role to play in its resolution. Unfortunately, Nostradamus' predictions often focus on destruction. Others that will unfold this decade fall squarely into this category. He writes, "The garden of the world near the new city, by the way of the hollow mountains, it will be conquered and plunged in the bath, forced to drink waters poisoned with sulfur." Most assume that the garden of the New World is a reference to the Amazon rainforest, while the New World City can certainly be linked to the Brazilian capital of Brasilia, which was founded in 1960. Undoubtedly, mountainous terrain abounds in that part of the world, and the reference to immersion in the bath suggests flooding, sulfur, volcanic activity. Could Brazil be facing a huge volcanic eruption triggered by an earthquake that could destroy the capital? While the prediction of an end to conflict certainly departs from Nostradamus' usual gloomy predictions, the possibility of a destructive volcanic event in Brazil is certainly making the region's residents shudder. For now, we can only hope that in this particular prediction, the astrologer was wrong. But the direst forecast that Nostradamus has left could have lasting consequences for the entire European continent. In one of the most disturbing quatrains, he writes, "When those who are of the lands of Europe see that England has put her throne behind, there will be fierce wars. The ancient plague will be worse than the enemies." Many who have read these lines suggest that the French astrologer may be alluding to the Third World, in which England will be at the forefront of the conflict. The unique phrasing almost hints at conflict with continental European neighbors, leading others to suggest it could be a political war centered on events that have continued to plague the United Kingdom and the European Union since Britain left continental government in 2020. However, as the clairvoyant predicts a violent war, we should not rule out any conflict. But more terrifying is the idea of a plague looming in the British Isles. Could this be another virus that has evolved? More recently, health experts have been warning of an increase in monkeypox cases. Regardless of how this particular quatrain is interpreted, one thing is certain. It speaks of a terrible year for the people of Britain. But, to be fair, we must say that each of Nostradamus' predictions must be viewed with a great deal of uncertainty, as most of them remain open to interpretation. However, since many of them seem to have become reality in the past, some argue that his prophecies can help us better prepare for when tragedy strikes, or even if it can be averted in one way or another. Yet such predictions should not deter us from living our lives, and certainly should not cause us to live in fear. We should always remember that a prediction is only one potential outcome of things, and for every terrifying and scary prediction, there is an equally favorable and positive outcome. There is, however, one particular group of prophets, And these are the prophets of God. These are people committed to the faith, falling into states of long years of hermitage, asceticism, and so on. Some of them reach a level of consciousness that seems to give them access to information invisible to us ordinary people. It was at just such a moment of information flowing about 300 years ago that St. Cosma warned, "You will look at the fruit and not be able to eat it." But you'll learn more about these predictions that have come to us by some of the strangest possible routes by watching the video you see to the left.